transformation, rotation, lecture number 4. Now, in this form, you need to understand that rotation is one of the trickiest part of from transformation. That means since you have already done reflection, you have already done translation, you have already done enlargement, rotation kept it in the end so that the concept behind the transformation is understood quite well. So few things, let's just revise in a way that the object point, each object point is transformed to each image point. So it is very necessary for you to understand that your each object point is transformed to each image point. But in rotation, there's another important thing that you need to understand is that there will be rotation point. There would be rotation point and there would be object given. And you will have to find out the image. You need to draw the image. To draw the image, you need to understand that the distance of each object point from rotation point will be same as each image point distance from rotation point in given direction or angle. So that means you need to understand the distance of each point from rotation point will be same as each image point distance from rotation point in given direction or angle. Now, the direction that I tested normally, or I would say 70%, 80% of the time is 90-degree clockwise from origin, 90-degree anti-clockwise from origin, 180-degree clockwise or anti-clockwise from origin. Now, these are the three important part of rotation that are normally being used. There would be rotation from any rotation of any angle or any point as well. That means your angle can be which can be 45-degree. It can be tested. Your angle can be 70-degree. Any point, it can be 1, 2. It can be 2, 2. It can be 2, 2. It can be 3 and 5. So any rotation point can be used. Any angle can be used, or the given form origin can be used. Origin is 0, 0. It can be clockwise from the origin 90-degree. It can be 90-degree anti-clockwise from the origin. It can be 180-degree. If it is 180-degree, it can be clockwise or anti-clockwise. Both come at the same point, and that too from the origin. So these are the four parts of the rotation that we're gonna cover. Let's start with 90-degree clockwise rotation from origin. Now, you need to understand one thing, and that is that when you are rotating 90-degree clockwise rotation from the origin and the object is in first quadrant. Object is in first quadrant. Now, what is first quadrant? Now, this is your first, second, third, and fourth. First, second, third, and fourth. So, your object is here in the first quadrant. If the object is there, you need to understand that both your x and y are positive. Both your x and y are positive. In the second quadrant, if you note, your x is negative and y is positive. In the third quadrant, both are negative. And in the fourth quadrant, x is positive and y is negative. So, if the object is in the first quadrant and it says 90-degree clockwise rotation from the origin, so in that case, your coordinate will interchange. Your coordinate will interchange and sign of y will change. Your coordinate will interchange and the sign of y will change. Now, this is your first important point. If the object is in the first quadrant and it is 90-degree clockwise rotation from the origin. When it says 90-degree, you need to understand that 90-degree is creating like this. That means there would be a horizontal line and there should be a vertical line. This can be in any direction. This is also your 90-degree. This can also be your 90-degree. This can also be your 90-degree. Similarly, all the 90-degree will have what? Your horizontal line will meet your vertical line from the point which will create what? 90-degree. And at the point where it creates 90-degree, that will be known as your rotation point. That will be known as your rotation point. Now, considering that your rotation point is 0, 0, it is your origin at the moment. So what you need to understand is that this is your A coordinate, B coordinate, C coordinate. The most important thing in this was the distance of each object point from the rotation point will be same as each image point distance from the rotation point in given direction or angle. Now the question says it is 90-degree. The question was very clear. It was 90-degree and it was clockwise. Clockwise means moving in the right-hand side direction. Moving right-hand side direction from the rotation point. From the rotation point. 90-degree clockwise rotation from what? Rotation point. Now, one thing is very clear, that your rotation point is origin. Your object point is this. If the distance of object point and the rotation point is half of this, half of the box, so automatically your image distance from the rotation point will also be half the box, because the object point, the object distance from the rotation point will be same as the image point distance from the rotation point. So it is what? Clockwise. Clockwise means moving on the right hand side, moving on the right hand side from the rotation point. If it was anti-clockwise, it would have moved on the left hand side. But at the moment, what we are doing is, we are doing it on the right hand side. Now, considering this, you need to understand that your half of distance on the 90-degree angle, your 90 degree is here. If it's half, then automatically this will be half as well. So this point will be your A dash. Considering the same distance, now if you see, this will create a 90-degree angle. It will create a 90-degree angle. Second thing, let's work upon B. Now, it was very easy for us to calculate through the one box given, because obviously diagonally we knew that it was just the half the distance here, and half the distance was here as well. But if we just see that B distance is two boxes diagonal, considering two boxes diagonal, we could directly say that this should also be 90-degree, two boxes diagonal, this should be here, that is your B dash. Now, knowing that this will also create your 90-degree. Now, how do I get to know that obviously this is your 90-degree side? You need to understand one important point here. The one important point is your horizontal distance will become vertical distance. Your horizontal distance will become vertical distance. Your vertical distance will become horizontal distance. So one thing is that your horizontal distance will become vertical distance. Your vertical distance will become horizontal distance. Now you need to understand this. Let's say to reach to B, there was this horizontal distance of 2. There was this horizontal distance of 2 units. Now, if the horizontal distance of 2 units, now this horizontal will become your vertical distance, knowing the fact that this will be 90-degree clockwise, moving it on the right-hand side, right? So if it is moving on the right-hand side, so we know that your horizontal will become what? Vertical. Your 2 horizontal becomes 2 vertical. And now, since we know that your vertical distance was 1, your vertical distance will become what? 1 horizontal distance. So your 1 vertical becomes what? Horizontal. Your vertical change to horizontal, your horizontal change to vertical, just to get what? Just to make sure that we get to the point of B dash. Now this is your B dash. Let's just work upon C to make sure that this is being applied on C or not. Let's just see on this. Moving on, if I just look into this, there is a distance of C from the rotation point. The distance of C from the rotation point, I know it is clockwise, so it will move on the right-hand side. It will move on the right-hand side from the rotation point. Please do understand it is from the rotation point. So obviously, if it is here, then considering this should go towards 3 boxes on the right. So this will go towards here. This will become your C dash. Noting the distance, you can always calculate through the scale as well. You can find out the distance, or you can just see the boxes 1, 2, and 3 diagonally. So diagonally 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, you can't have diagonally here. This will not create a 90-degree angle. So 90-degree angle is created on this side, stating that obviously 3 boxes are on the top. So 3 boxes will be on this side. Now, if this thing is not being understood, let's just work on the other point, and that is that the horizontal distance was 1. So this horizontal distance becomes your new vertical distance. This horizontal distance becomes your new vertical distance. Now, knowing this, that since this was your horizontal distance becomes vertical distance, there were 3 vertical distance as well of unit. So if the 3 vertical was there, vertical becomes horizontal towards the right, because obviously it is creating 90 degrees. So 1, 2, and 3. So we reach to the same point of C dash. So considering the same points, so we will make sure that we draw the diagram here. such that it creates a rotation of what? A dash, rotation of B dash, rotation of what? C dash, from the rotation point. From the rotation point. Now moving further, the most important point with this was then when the rotation is taking place 90-degree clockwise from the origin, and the object is in the first quadrant. When the object is in the first quadrant, your coordinates will interchange and the sign of the y will change. Now what does that mean? This means that your A was 1, 1. So obviously if I interchange, it will still remain 1, 1. But now it will become 1, -1. So if you see 1 and -1 is here. Let's work on B. B is 2 and 1. So B dash will become what? 1, 2. 1, 2. But the sign of the y will change. So y sign will become what? -2. Your C was 1, 3. So C dash will become 3, 1. Interchange and the sign of the y will change. So eventually if you just see that your 1, 1 becomes 1 and -1. Your 2, 1 becomes what? 1 and -2. Your 1 and 3 becomes what? 3 and -1. So your coordinates will interchange as well as the sign of the y will change if the object is in the first quadrant. Now let's work upon the same thing, but changing the rotation point. Now rotation point is changed. Let's say that the rotation point is 4 and 1. The rotation point is 4, 1. It is clockwise rotation of 90-degree from 4, 1. Now, since I know that this becomes 4 and 1. Now, what I need to understand is that it is a clockwise rotation. So, if it is a clockwise rotation, you need to understand that, let's say this becomes your A, this is your B, and this point is your C point. If I work upon B first, your B has just the horizontal distance. And when it says clockwise, from the rotation point, it should move on the right-hand side. It should not move on the left-hand side from the line, right? So when it is moving on the right-hand side, you know there were 2 points towards B from the rotation point as an object. Your image will have the same point, but your horizontal distance will become your vertical distance. So 2 point horizontal will become 2 point vertical. So this will become B dash. Considering, let's say C now. If I say, or let's work on A first. A has just the 3 point horizontal distance. And it will move clockwise, so it will move on the right-hand side from the rotation point. So since it is moving on the right-hand side, 3 point horizontal will become 3 point vertical. So 3 point vertical will move 1, 2, and 3. This will become what? A dash. So horizontal distance becomes what? Vertical distance. Now the most important point. The most important point here is your A. We need to understand where this will be marked. So if I say your C is diagonal towards the rotation point, first of all, you need to understand it is diagonal towards the rotation point. And as it says that it will move clockwise from the rotation. So clockwise will be on the right-hand side. Clockwise will be on the right-hand side. Your 90-degree will be something like this. It will be somewhere on this side, right? So that means this will become your 90-degree. Now, knowing the fact that your 90-degree will be here. So let's just work upon this. Let's just work with the horizontal distance and the vertical distance. If I just say that your vertical distance were 2 and your horizontal distance were 3. Your vertical distance were 2 and your horizontal distance were 3. So can I say your horizontal becomes vertical? So vertical 1, 2, 3. And your vertical distance become horizontal 1 and 2. So that means your diagram is created here, which means if I draw a 90-degree rotation clockwise from the point 4 and 1, this will be drawn here. This will become A dash, B dash, and C dash because of the rotation of what? 90 degrees. So here it goes. Now this will become what? Your rotation of what? 90-degree from clockwise from the rotation point, which is 4, 1. Now if you just look at this, the distance of the horizontal is same. The distance of this point is also same. Your 90-degree is creating from this to this as well. So this is also your 90-degree point, right? So this will also create your 90-degree, considering that it is your rotation of clockwise from the rotation point to this point. Your vertical and your horizontal, 3 horizontal becomes 3 vertical and 2 vertical becomes 2 horizontal to form the rotation of clockwise from any rotation point, that is 4, 1 in the given situation. Now let's work out with another example, knowing that we need to rotate 90-degree clockwise from the rotation point 2, 5. Now we know one thing, that the rotation clockwise will be, if the line is drawn, the clockwise from the rotation point will be right hand side from the rotation point. Kindly note this thing is important. Moving on the clockwise direction, you should be knowing that where to rotate at least. The other thing is that the diagram does not have exact distance. The diagram has what? Vertical and horizontal distances. Let's just work upon this. One vertical and one horizontal and 2 vertical. So if one horizontal and 2 vertical distance is there, your horizontal will move to vertical and your vertical should move to horizontal. Now noting that this will go towards the left hand side. This will go towards the left hand side, creating the fact that it will create 90 degrees. So 90 degree will be created somewhere here on this side, right? It should not be created here, because when you will be making sure that you change your distance of your vertical to horizontal, now your horizontal is 1 and your vertical is 2. So that means your 2 vertical will become 2 horizontal, right? When you are changing your horizontal will be changed to 2 parts. Your horizontal will change to 2 parts, one towards up and one towards down. But the 90 degree that is being created will be towards up. So that means when we will make sure that we mark the diagram, mark the point, we'll make sure that we mark 2 points on the left and 1 point towards up, so that it creates a 90 degree angle. It creates a 90 degree angle. 1 point vertical, horizontal becomes 1 point what? Vertical. 2 points vertical becomes what? 2 point horizontal. So that means your entire concept will rotate around what? The distance and the rotation of 90 degree from what? Rotation point, and noting the fact that where your 90 degree will be created. Where your 90 degree will be created. Now, this was for A. Now let's just work out for C. If I work out for C, let's just see. Okay, your C is 1, 2, 3, 4. Your C is 4 point vertical. So 90 degree, it will be created like this. Obviously, it will move towards the right hand side, right? So 90 degree, your vertical becomes your horizontal. 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Vertical becomes 1, 2, 3, 4 big point becomes what? horizontal. So this will become your C dash. Now moving on to what? Moving on to B, because C was easy. It was just the vertical direction. Your vertical becomes horizontal. If we just work upon B now, let's work upon B, considering that B is like this. So your 90 degree will be on this side. Do you agree to this? Because it will move on the right hand side, but you note that 90 degree will be somewhere here, not here. This will not be 90 degree. Your 90 degree will always be created what? As in horizontal meets the vertical. Now noting the fact that this thing will be used with the help of what? Vertical distance is 1, your horizontal distance is 1, and your vertical distance is 4. Your horizontal distance is 1 and your vertical distance is 4. So vertical distance 4 becomes your horizontal distance 1, 2, 3, 4, and your horizontal distance becomes your vertical distance 1. So that means your 3 points that were majorly used will, one point will be here, another point will be here, and the third point is on this side. So this point becomes what? 90 degree rotation from what? 90 degree rotation from the point 2 comma 5, and noting the fact that each point A changes to A dash, your B changes to what? B dash, and your C changes to what? C dash, with what? 90 degree rotation clockwise from the rotation point. Clockwise from the rotation point. Now let's just work upon rotation 90 degree anti-clockwise from origin. Now, one thing is very clear: when you had 90 degree from origin, there was a statement which says that if it is moving clockwise and the diagram is on the first quadrant, then the diagram used to go on the fourth quadrant, interchanging the coordinates and changing the sign of the y. So when the rotation is 90 degree anti-clockwise from the origin and the diagram is again in the first quadrant, the coordinates will interchange. The coordinate will interchange and sign of x will change. Sign of x will change. That means that the sign of y will be positive, the sign of the x will be negative. Moving down, if you just see that this is your origin, this is A, B, and C. I know one thing for the fact that this is your half point. Now moving anti-clockwise, this should move on the left hand side. So if this is half, then obviously it should also be half. So your A coordinate becomes A dash here. If this is B, and now you know that your coordinates is anti-clockwise on the left hand side, so horizontal becomes vertical, and vertical becomes what? Horizontal. So if I say your two distance horizontal will become two distance vertical, and one distance vertical will become one distance horizontal. That means at this point you will get what? B dash. Noting that I know that what is the horizontal and vertical distance and where does the 90 degree lies. Now, if you just see the C part, if we just work on the C part, C is the object coordinate. Now, if I move 90 degree will be here. 90 degree will move on this side, noting the fact that 1 is horizontal and 3 is vertical. So your 3 vertical will become 3 horizontal, and 1 horizontal will become 1 vertical. So that means your new coordinate for this will be here. So this will become C dash. What more important is that your A that was 1 comma 1 becomes A dash, and A dash it becomes minus 1 comma 1. Your B which was 2 and 1, your B dash becomes 1 comma 2, which means minus 1 comma 2. Your C which was 1 and 3 When we interchange, it will become 3, 1, but sign of the x will change, it will become -3 and 1. So if you just look at the coordinates, -1, 1, -3, 1, -1, and 2, according to the statement that I said, that if the diagram is in the first quadrant and it is rotated 90-degree anti-clockwise, the coordinates will interchange and the sign of the x will change. Remember one thing, these type of questions are asked when there is no diagram, and you might be told to write down the new coordinates of this. In the same diagram, if I shift 180 degree, if I shift 180 degree clockwise or anti-clockwise, 180 degree clockwise, anti-clockwise is same thing, right? Just the fact that you need to understand that in this case, your horizontal is basically your horizontal and your vertical is basically your vertical, which means your horizontal will not shift to vertical, your vertical will not shift to horizontal. Your horizontal will remain horizontal, your vertical will remain vertical, just for the fact that it will be on the opposite side. It will be on the opposite side. So that means if I just say, let's just mark here, if I say that horizontal is 1 and vertical is 1. So if it horizontal 1, vertical 1, so this means opposite side, same difference. If the half of the block is there, so half of the block opposite side. If B is in this side, horizontal 2, vertical 2, so horizontal 2 and vertical 1 will come here. If we work upon C, horizontal is 1 and vertical is 3, right? So horizontal will be 1 and vertical will be 3. So this should be coming here. So this will become your 180-degree rotation of from the origin. This will be 180-degree rotation from the origin. Now you need to understand one thing. Coordinates will be same. Coordinates will be same, but signs will change. Signs will change. You need to understand this, that coordinate will be same, but signs will be changed. If the first quadrant figure is there, first quadrant figure, both will be positive, then both will become what? Negative. If you just see 1 and 1, A was 1, 1 becomes A dash as -1, -1. B, which was 2 and 1, becomes what? B dash -2 and -1. C, which was 1 and 3, becomes C dash as -1, -3. That means both the coordinate signs are changed because of what? The rotation of from the origin. Now, moving on to this, there are just the three things which are more focused. If we just work upon, that means that if it is 90-degree clockwise from the origin, 90-degree anti-clockwise from the origin, and 180-degree clockwise anti-clockwise from the origin, your normal matrix is 1, 0, 0, 1. Your normal matrix is 1, 0, 0, 1. Knowing that if it is 90-degree clockwise from origin, you know that your coordinates interchange and sign of the y will change. So 1, 0, 0, 1 will become 0, 1, 1, 0, and the sign of the y will change. That means 0, 1, -1 and 0. If it was 1, 0, 0, 1, which is original, if it says 90-degree anti-clockwise from origin matrix, from origin, you know that coordinates interchange, and the sign of the x will change. If it is 180-degree clockwise, either it is anti-clockwise or clockwise, but it is from the origin. So 1, 0, 0, 1 will become same coordinates, but the signs will change. -1, 0, 0, -1. So these are the three matrices of what? Rotation following from the origin. Now you know that the concept of the rotation from any other point from the origin can be applied in the rotation. This was entirely based upon the 90-degree rotation clockwise, 90-degree rotation anti-clockwise, and 180-degree rotation clockwise, anti-clockwise, that will remain same.